Welcome back, San Diego Spotlight. Derek Evans here, your host. Scott Ginsberg, Senior VP with Hughes Marino in the studio today. Scott, I want to get down to some brass tacks here because, we've talked about, your tenant focus. We've gotten a little bit into the negotiation side, but there are really some instances that people probably aren't aware of where they can really take advantage of their circumstance. So when you're initially going into a lease, especially if it's a new building, there's going to be tenant improvements and stuff like that. There's a lot less room, to have the upper hand, right? Because you're asking a landlord to plop out some money and, build stuff for you and all these different things going on.
Au contraire.
Do tell.
Au contraire. You're a landlord. You have vacant space. You have products sitting on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to paint the sky as blue as you can get it, right?
Yeah.
We can do that. You're a yes man. Yeah, we can do this. We can do that. I'm obviously being a little sarcastic, but within reason, of course, right? This industry is the only industry where if you're a tenant, you actually get treated worse by being a repeat customer with a landlord. Now, let me clarify that.
Seriously.
Let me give you an example. What does a landlord want to do? And I'm not here to bash landlords. I'm just saying landlord and tenant just to make it easy for the listeners,
Sure,
right?
Sure.
And so what's a landlord's motivation? The longest term and the highest rent. Do you know why? Because it increases the value of the building. The higher the rent, the more the building is worth because there's what's called a capitalization rate formula. The lower the rent, the less the building's worth. Some landlords are not sellers and they don't really care, and they don't really care about book value, and they could just do a low rent deal. But for the most part, it kind of swings the other way. Excuse me. Now, if you're looking at a building and you're looking to relocate and it's a space that is vacant, there are only so many buttons that you can push, meaning there are only so many cash buckets a landlord can give you or you can draw from. A, there's rent. B, there's tenant improvements. C, there's free rent, which obviously coincides with the rent, right? It's just semantics. It's a different structuring of a deal. But in the downturn of the market, to give you an example, I was doing a 20,000 square foot lease, and we were in lease negotiations, ready to sign a lease, maybe another couple rounds of lease negotiations. We did not want to stay in the current building. We were going to renew at just shy of $2 a square foot. We were going to go into a new building, a Class A building, which a Class A building is a nice, new, great amenities, tile, travertine on the outside, wood frame door, the whole deal, right? We were going to go to that building, and we were going to obtain a year free of rent. A year free of rent, okay? And the rental rate was probably in the low $2 per square foot range. At the 11th hour, the existing landlord came back and basically dropped their rate by almost 25% because they did not want to lose the tenant. So in a lease renewal, landlords have the most high profit margin for that transaction. And the two reasons why is A, they've got no downtime, meaning you're going to renew the lease. And if you're going to do tenant improvements, paint and carpet, move a couple walls, you're paying rent while you're doing that.
Right.
And the second thing is, what does a renewing tenant typically want? A fraction of the improvements that a new tenant's going to want. So while tenants get preached by landlords, oh my God, it's going to cost you all this to move and this and that. Yes, that is the case for certain tenants that have a lot of infrastructure, biotech companies, maybe it's a fab company, whatever it might be. But for 75, 80% of tenants, it's not that big to move. And you really have to push this threshold to get 1 foot out the door to get the existing landlord to bend over and really kind of give you a below market deal. Because in theory, just to give you a simple math equation, and this is just numbers out of thin air, but I'm not going to be that far off. If you're a 10,000 square foot tenant, you have 50 employees, 60 employees, whatever it is. and let's say you're paying $2 a square foot, and the market rate is $1.90 a square foot. Maybe you're a little bit above market. And the landlord says, hey, I'll renew you at $1.85, give you a couple months free. I like you, Mr. Tenant. We'll go on our merry way and paint your walls and give you new carpet. Hopefully they're not going to paint your carpet. So, and you're thinking, okay, that's not that bad of a deal. That's a market deal. But that landlord didn't have to sit on the space vacant for a year. He didn't have to put in 4 times the cost of the improvements that he would have, and also suffer downtime to get a new tenant if you vacated. Well, you should extract and share in those profits. Well, how do you do that? Leverage. And you could go to a landlord all day long and beat them till they're blue in the face, but the reality is you can't force anybody to do something. But that's the highest profit margin transaction for a landlord. And if you're a tenant renewing, typically that $2 or $1.85 rental rate, if you kind of run a math formula and you say the landlord's going to sit on the building for 9 months and he's going to have to put in 3 or 4x, his break-even point is shockingly low. It's probably in the $1.10 per square foot range. Now, I'm not saying you're ever going to get to $1.10, but what I am saying is you should be well below market in the $1.60 range and the $1.55 range. Maybe it's a combination of that in conjunction with free rent. On the flip side, if you don't want to stay, maybe you've outgrown your building, you just can't stay. The landlord can't accommodate your space needs anymore. And you're going to go to a new building, and you're an attractive tenant. You can pay your rent, and at least you've got cash in the bank, and you're not going to be out of business in a few months, meaning an attractive tenant. And I say that in seriousness, right? Because if you're a tenant and you're showing $10,000 in your bank account, you're not an attractive tenant, right? So a landlord is going to paint the sky blue. And they're going to say, look, how do we get them in the space? We're really motivated. I've been on tours. If you're touring a tenant that's, let's say, less than 5,000 square feet, you're basically going to tour the space on your own. If you're touring a 100,000 square foot tenant, you're going to get the landlord to show up with cookies and water. I kid you not. I kid you not. Does that kind of clarify it a little bit better?
I think that makes it pretty clear.
Okay.
That's Scott Ginsberg, Senior VP with Hughes Marino. Man, I have questions for you all day long, but we are out of time, man. I hope we can do this again in the near future.
Absolutely.
Great insight. You work for a great company who's made a great name for themselves. Scott Ginsberg, Senior VP with Hughes Marino. Thank you for your time on the Spotlight today.
Thank you, Derek. It was a pleasure.
Great stuff. We'll be back again on Thursday, same time, same channel, with more San Diego Spotlight for you on ESPN 1700.